Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm George Moss again here at allpointstv.com and our new listening audience at 92.1 WFOB, and we are very glad to have them with us as well. And we are here every Monday from 2 o'clock to 3, and we air at the time the station will in fact air the program later on 92.1. We're always glad to have all of our listeners with us, and we hope you'll stay tuned for the next hour. John has done a good job of organizing the studio here, and we will be given a cue at 26 minutes, and we'll take a break from WFOB's broadcast, and they'll do their spots, and we'll come back on the other side of that 4 minutes later, and we will apprise you where we were when the break occurred. But we are very happy to have you aboard. I want to come to the studio today to talk about a couple of my favorite books, and I want to play off of some of the things that are happening in the news that have to do with these two books. One of them is called The Snapping of the American Mind, and that book is written by David Kapelian, and that has been one of my top, one of the books that's at the top of my list. The other book is one I brought to the studio before, and is also one of my favorite books. It's called The Road to Serfdom, and this book is written by F.A. Hayek. Frederick A. Hayek, who wrote this book in 1944, and he was talking about the road to serfdom. And then the book by David Kapelian, I think these two books are tied together because if you're going to be on the road to serfdom, then you got to, it's got to be a snapping of the American mind, because people in their right mind are not going to buy this going down the road that leads to serfdom. And so I think these two books are tied together, although they're written in different time periods. Kapelian's book is a very recent publication, and Hayek was writing his book. The Road to Serfdom was written in the at the heart, really at the end of the New Deal under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And he saw where this was going, and I think all of us right now in 2017 can see where this is going if it's not arrested, because we're saying that more and more power is accruing to central government in this country, and that was not the intent of the framers. The framers didn't intend to have all this power concentrated in Washington, D.C. Their idea was to decentralize power even on the federal level. And that's what you mean when you talk about the separation of powers and the check and balance system. And so there's not only a decentralization intended on the federal level and the state level with powers assigned on both of those two levels, but also in the federal structure, the powers were to be disaggregated and divided so that there was not a concentration of power in either one of the three branches of government on the federal level. The states were to have power, the federal government to have power, but in the federal government, the power was supposed to have been dispersed among the three branches of government, so that in Article 1, you'd have that power that's assigned to the legislative body, the lawmaking body. And then in Article 2, the executive branch was created, and they were supposed to have the enforcement power. So when the laws are made by the legislature, then the executive branch would enforce the laws. And then the third branch would be the one that would be the arbiter of those laws that are passed by the legislative branch and laws enforced by the executive branch, and to make sure those laws would be in keeping with the constitutional mandates and restrictions on power. So you can see almost like there was it's almost like they were obsessed, weren't they, in terms of trying to make sure that power was not concentrated so much that it could in fact spiral out of control. And how good a job they did a good job of putting it on parchment. But one thing that always occurs is that those that are wielding power will eventually wake up to the fact that this is only so many words on paper. And in the long run, what will happen is that they will begin to defy what's on paper, slide from underneath it, And before you know it, they have in fact dismissed it, as has happened right now, based upon another book that's been written. That book, this is a book written by Judge Napolitano, talks about the Constitution in exile. That is, say that the Constitution is no longer a point of consideration when we look at what government's in fact doing. In fact, some of the pundits, one of the ones I have a lot of respect for, don't always agree with him, but I have a lot of respect for him, is radio host Mark Levin, and he speaks in terms of a post-constitutional America. And he doesn't say it in so many words, but when you start talking in terms of a post-constitutional America, what you're really talking about is that the Constitution has been dismissed. Otherwise, how can it be post, meaning in the aftermath of, if the document is still excellent in terms of it being the point of departure in terms of what we do and what we don't do in the country? If it is not a post-constitutional America, then the Constitution is being consulted when laws are passed and when actions are taken by government and all of those things. And you are living in a constitutional America, but that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about we're living in a post-constitutional America. And I would concur with that. I think we are living in times right now where the Constitution is in exile. And that would mean that the Constitution has been dismissed.
Both sides, both parties seem so willing to not even acknowledge its existence. I mean, both parties are so willing just to blithely act like it doesn't even exist, and then they look at you and mock you for bringing up questions connected to constitutionality.
They do, John. We've got to accept that they are not going to be opening their arms up and welcoming us to the table under these conditions. But we've got to challenge this, because this is not the intention that was there in 1787 when the drafting of the Constitution was made. The idea was to, in fact, draft a document that would do what the Articles tried to do, but was ineffective in carrying it out. But what the Articles tried to do was to keep the government on the federal level limited in what it could do by so weakening it that it could not do anything. And that was, of course, the idea that they had in 1781 when this document was put in place. But 5 years thereafter, they had the Shades Rebellion in Massachusetts, and they found they had so weakened the federal government that the umbrella of protection that the federal government should provide, given domestic tranquility and maybe some international problems as well, because we were a new nation and we were there for the pickings for those nations that had been around for a while and could come against this nation given its embryonic development. So that was a problem, and they recognized it in 1786 that they had so weakened the federal government, they had to do something about it. And they went to Philadelphia with the idea of remedying the situation to make the Articles make the government more powerful under the Articles, but got there and found that that was not quite possible to do it under the restrictions that document brought to the table, so to speak. The task was too Herculean to be resolved under the banner of the Articles of Confederation. So after getting there, they went beyond their commission, because they had been commissioned to go there with the idea of revising the document. But they knew when they got there, these were the intellectuals now that Ayn Rand was talking about in a book called The New Intellectuals. These were the intellectuals, and when we got there, it didn't take a whole lot of time for these intellectuals to arrive at the conclusion that, hey, this document cannot be revised. We cannot get the security that we now recognize that the nation needs based upon a revision of this document. Is too flawed. And because they now were going beyond their commission through which they've been sent there, that they now had to meet in secret because they've not been sent there to do what they're now understanding as intellectuals that must be done if they're going to carry out the spirit of the mandate. The mandate was specific to revision, but the spirit of it was to fix the problem. And that's what has happened in terms of a shift from the mandate of their being in Philadelphia to what when they got there, going beyond the mandate, although the spirit of what they were there for, they did not in fact supersede that, because the mandate was to fix the problem. But they found, being intellectuals, that they could not fix the problem without starting all over again. And I want to know, I want to know, can we use that idea in what's being discussed right now? What about it in Obamacare? You keep on talking about tweaking this and tweaking that, and sometimes you have to start all over again. And they're not going to do that, because to start all over again would be to understand where the mistake was made in 2010 with that. And what was the mistake that was made? The mistake was taking it from the market and placing it under the government. That's the mistake. And they have that power under the umbrella of the federal government, and they're not going to give it back. So they talk about repealing and replacing Obamacare. That's nonsense. They're not going to repeal it and replace Obamacare. What they're going to do is they're going to revise it and change some language in it and put it under the Republicans' name. But it's going to be the same thing that you had under Obama, under the Obama administration. They're not going to repeal this, because to repeal it would be and replace it would be to repeal it. And when I say repeal, I'm talking about one thing here that they're not going to mention this, but I'm going to mention it on this program here, and that is they're talking about repeal. If you're talking about repealing it, you got to repeal it from the hands of the government. You just can't check. You can't just take the language and then place it back under the same umbrella. That's what they found at the Constitutional Convention. They did not intend to go there to repeal the articles. They went there and found out that in order to do the job they've been sent there to do, it was necessary for them to repeal it and replace it. That's what they did. So it's not like we don't know. It's not like we don't have a blueprint of when something is not working. You have to repeal it and you have to replace it. They're not going to replace that. They're going to repeal it and change some of the language in it. And so it won't be a repeal. Because if you're going to repeal it and then replace it, you got to repeal it and take it out of the government, from underneath the government's umbrella, and put it back where it was before the government took it over. The government's not a hospital. The government is a institution of force. And to have them getting into the healthcare business is nothing other than the government tightening up going down that road and tightening up its vestiture in terms of going down the road to serfdom, because all this is more government takeover and more concentration of power on the part of the government. The government can't deliver any health care, and it doesn't belong in the healthcare business. And if you think it does, try to find that in Article 1, Section 8. Show me where that's located in those 18 clauses in that section of the Constitution. Where is that found? In the enumeration of powers. And they were very careful to limit the concentration of power. They wanted to limit the federal government. They knew it could go out of control, because these persons were students of history, and they had seen this time and time again repeating itself, and they tried to prevent it over here. They were just not in that room now just patching stuff up. They were there with a prescient understanding of where governments had made their mistakes before, and they were determined not to make that mistake here. Why would they want to go down the same road when those roads that all those governments had gone down the same road to the same dead end? And they tried to prevent this country, this new experiment, which is what it was, from doing that. They tried to bring it back from the brink
But we're even having
and do something different.
We're even having a kind of a system of aristocrats being developed. We got people who've been in there for generations now, especially locally in the Kildee family, and also in the Dingle family here in Michigan.
Yeah,
the longest running, political family, way longer probably the Kennedys. They were in power since the old man, who was in the power during the FDR administration, 1930s. His son, who served in the he just retired, and then his wife took it over.
Yeah.
I mean, this is absurd. I mean, and nobody, but if that was R after their name, they'd be screaming bloody murder. But since you got a D after their name, it's permissible.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%, John. That is it's an outrage, quite frankly, because the premise of our government, the way our government is situated, is that it was situated so that you would not have dynastic leadership. And that's what we have when you have these families, one after the other, running on the family name. The Kennedys also, that would be another part of it. And these family dynasties was not intended. You have that in North Korea. But it wasn't intended over here.
And the Castros in Cuba,
Castros in Cuba.
But these leftists always say that we got to have more of a playing field that's level. And okay, where's that at? Is represented at the Koreans, basically the same. And the only way you got power in the Soviet Union is you killed off your predecessor, basically, or you did some background stuff so they can actually be disposed of. So I mean. And that's what that's what the kind of the China government they want. They don't want a smoother transition like we had at one time. They want brutality and backstabbing and intrigue and all that other stuff. That's what they advocate for.
And that's how they wield power right in front of the American people's back. And we have power that could negate that power, but we don't see a need to do that. But the ballot box is a very powerful instrument in this country if it's used properly, and it can be used to rein government in, but you have to understand what the government itself is doing and what its intentions were and what the purpose of it was based upon the framers. If we don't understand the framers, we won't understand how out of control this experiment is at this moment. But we've gotten way off the track.
But this is a situation, basically, the old analogy, and almost tired out. You put a frog in, fairly cool water, put it in a pot, you put him in the water in the pot, and you just gradually let the pot heat up, and he finds that the frog's cooked because he wasn't aware of how hot it was getting. Mm-hmm. And basically, well, let's face it, we don't really teach government classes like we once did. We don't teach respect for the Constitution, and there is flaws with it. I'd be the first one to admit it, but we have a people who are just basically the only thing their focus is getting a new tattoo and what video games are coming out. That's what it seems like, because there's so many things going on by the side. The thing is, it is awfully hard because when you have a press that refuses to adequately cover, I guess there's C-SPAN. I mean, you should watch C-SPAN, as boring as watching ice melt, but if you really have to be kept on, want to be on top of things, it's available. But we aren't. None of us are. Nobody sits there and watches what these people do. We should have to you'd have to have 20 hours a week, though, to get dedicated to keep up with these bozos are up to.
John, if they don't turn that television set off for most of the day, and I'm talking about, when I say most of the day, I'm not talking about halftime on and the TV set halftime off. If that TV set is not off for the greater portion of the day, I'm talking about in the 20-some hour range. There are days when my television set is never on. I mean, because when the TV set is on, when you first turn it on, the brainwashing starts, and it does not end until the television set is turned off. The indoctrination starts at the very moment that television set is turned on in your house. And the outside influence, because they're not, the FCC commissions these, this is a licensed group. The government licensed it. And the government licensed it for what purpose, you think? So as to be edifying, in order to be informative. Go look at television sometimes and just look at what's on the idiot box, as they call it. Some people call it the idiot box. Go look at it sometimes and just look at the programming. And then after the program is over, they used to have this one program called Laugh In, right? And they would be telling a joke a minute. And what they found out is that people couldn't recall. They laughed at the joke, but when the next joke came up, they couldn't remember the joke they laughed at previous to that. And that only happened a minute ago, and they couldn't recall what the other joke was about. And so, if you think it's about edification, and they're going to try to edify you and enlighten you, and do what they said in that Batman movie, where the Joker was saying, enlighten your mind. If you think that's what they're doing, and that's what TV is, they're going to license television, and they want an enlightened public so that you can open your eyes up and see that you're on the road to serfdom. Or you can see that you can be enlightened enough to become more aware and more conscious now, and you're going to see there's been a snapping of the American mind that David Kapelian is writing about in his book. And you're going to be able to see all these things now because there's so much enlightenment they got you to think. In fact, after you get through watching television for any period of time, it can be an hour. If you sit there for hours and hours and hours watching television, your mind has been pretty much reduced during that time period until you snap out of it to a puddle of mush. I mean, it's a brainwashing. The government is not trying to inform anybody. The government is interested in controlling its population, and it is not interested in health care. It's not even interested in providing insurance for health care. That's what government is interested in. Government is an institution of force and mandates, orders. The government gives orders. And this idea to get into all these other things, that's not what the framers were thinking about. The framers were understanding that government is force. And they were trying to make sure that force was held in check. And everything they did in that convention, starting June 25th and lasting until September the 17th, 8 days short of 3 months. And they stayed in that room all that time. They met there in that room, and they kept meeting in that room. And what they were meeting about is, if we do this, there's never been tried before, what are the unintended consequences of that? They had to figure that out. And that's what this whole thing, you write this down, and then you examine all of the possibilities that language brings about. What would that do? And they finally, after almost 3 months, it was 8 days short of 3 months, but almost 3 months, they pretty much had the document that they want to present now before the public. And I remember that reading in this book called A Patriot's History of America, where the writers were saying, Schweitzer and Adams, Michael Adams was the other author of the book. They reported where someone asked Franklin, because they were in that room, as I said earlier, they were in that room secretively meeting. They didn't want a person to know that they were thrown. The idea that they'd gone there to rectify the problems in the document that was already the excellent document in the country. They saw that was not going to be able to be revised. It just had too many flaws in it. And to revise the document would have been the same thing anyway, because you had to revise it out of existence. Just like Obamacare, you got to revise it out of existence. You can't revise government health care. You can't control the costs of anything the government gets involved in, because you're putting too much bureaucracy in between the care and the patient. It's too much bureaucracy, and there's a cost. And everybody wants their cut. You know, if it's being disaggregated from Washington, everybody along the way to the local community where it's being delivered, everybody wants their cut. You can't reduce the cost of anything on the government's mandate. The mandate itself is a cost.
Yeah, we're coming up to 26 minutes, so we'll break at 26. So we just want people to know what we're going to do. 26 minutes, or the people of WFOV can have the station break, and we'll come back in 4 minutes. And it's coming right up, like I said, at 26. So I want to keep that. And I also want people to remember that they can watch these shows in their entirety, even the 4 minutes are missing when they're on their break, at All Points TV on YouTube. Also, we have www.allpointstv.com, a website. So anyway, we're coming back from break. Okay.
We're back. Glad to have the persons that were away for 4 minutes, and we're glad you're back to the program. And they will on the tape broadcast. It will be filtered into the broadcast.
Yeah, at 30 minutes we'll
on
be
WFOB.
Back. We'll welcome the other viewers back at 30 minutes. So.
Okay. And we're glad to have all of you here, as a matter of fact, and want you to stay tuned. We're really learning how to, I guess we're doing a simulcast. And so we are kind of, working the kinks out. We'll get it right because at allpointstv.com we have the technicians to work us through the process. The framers were very, very meticulous. They didn't just write things out without thinking about what are the effects of what we're writing down here. This is something that has never been done before. So they got to think about it because there was no model that they could go to and say that, okay, this has been tried and this was the outcome of it. They were doing everything anew, and therefore they had to not only come up with the things that would fix a problem that they've been sent there to fix, but they also had to think about that which fixes it. What are the effects of that? What does that break? And it is unbelievable. It's unbelievable when you understand the 7 articles they came up with and how it reads thematically. A lot of people say that they don't know what the framers intended when they put in there you have to be a natural born citizen to be president of the United States. And they say that in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5, where it says that you must, the qualification of president is that one of them is that you must be a natural born citizen. And people say, well, it never is in fact defined in the Constitution what it means to be natural born, but they don't understand that the framers took for granted that that it was taken care of. It was taken care of in the Constitution because the Constitution is thematically written. In other words, if you look at Article 1, Article 1 does not contradict what's found in Article 2. That which is given and dispensed to the legislative branch of government is not contradicted in Article 2. Have you noticed that? And so it is like a theme going throughout the Constitution. And so the question then, and I don't think Mark Levine he's a scholar, but some of the things that I hear on his broadcast about this aspect, because he was supporting Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is not eligible to be president of the United States. And if Mark Levine understood the Constitution in its thematic aspect, and maybe he does understand it, not honest enough to say it, but I'd like to give him the benefit of the doubt and say it's not a matter of honesty and his integrity, but a matter of the fact that it's gone unrecognized under the radar that there's a thematic writing of the Constitution, and it folds into other aspects of that which came afterwards. So when it starts out with Article 1...
We're coming back now for the viewers for WFOV. Hold on for a second. We'll say welcome back.
Yeah, the viewers, I want to welcome you back, and I want to also
welcome back.
Tell you that you came back at the right time, because we're getting into a part of the discussion right now that has to do with the Constitution and how thematically, how it is written thematically. And there is a theme in it. The theme of the Constitution, by the way, is restraint of government. If I had to put a title on the Constitution, above the Constitution, I would put, not above the Constitution, but as a subtitle of the Constitution, I would put the restraint placed upon government. Because that's what the Constitution does. It's like what Walter Williams said. If you ever woke up, you've been in a coma for a while, and you woke up and you were trying to figure out where are you, and you read the Constitution, you know that you're in a place where power has to be restrained. Because in reading the Constitution, you'll see that that's all the Constitution deals with. The first 7 articles of the Constitution, before there is an amendment, and there are no amendments in the Constitution until 3 years after it's been ratified in 1788. You don't have any amendments until 1791, where they put 10 amendments in there at one time. And what were those amendments? The Bill of Rights. And what is that to say to the government? To say, hands off of these rights that people have. Another restraint. The first 10 amendments, all of them put there in one time. Why? To continue what the framers had done in Philadelphia. So the first 10 amendments is a further to restrain the government. And that had been promised in Philadelphia. Coming out of there, they had said that they would in fact pass a Bill of Rights if the Constitution was ratified. And 3 years later, henceforth, they did that, because it wasn't this kind of thing you see going on right now, where politicians will in fact run on one thing, get in there and do something totally different. The revolutionaries were there, still alive at that time, and they had promised the revolutionaries that you can put your guns down now because we solved the problem of King George III. And those revolutionaries were waiting for them to fulfill their promise to do what they said they're going to do, and that is to put in a Bill of Rights that further said to the government that these are prohibitions, that you cannot in fact cross that line. And they dared not do other than that. See, no wonder Thomas Jefferson said that when you have government that fears the people, you have liberty. But when you have the people fear their government, you have tyranny. And I would ask you, which one do you have right now? Do you have government in Washington that fears the American people? Let us say they will say one thing while they're running for election, and when they get into power, they dare not violate it because the people are aware of the promise, and the politicians are fearful of the retaliatory actions that were taken by the people if those promises are not kept. Let me give you an example with the health care. Because that's what's everybody's talking about the health care right now. You probably remember that when Obamacare, as they call it, the so-called Affordable Care Act, the ACA, is not even affordable, and where's the care? You have to understand something. When you take the profit, listen to this very carefully. When you take the profit out of the healthcare system, the caring is taken out of it. Now, you may not understand that, but let me try to explain what I mean by that. If you in fact give health care to a patient, the effect of that care is not felt by the physician because he's not the one being cured. But because the physician has provided the care, he wants to be compensated for the time he put into in delivering the care the patient received. Therefore, he has a vested interest in making sure the care is quality because he wants to keep the patient alive. Now, what do you think happens if you take the profit that's paid to the caregiver away from the patient and you put it in the hands of the government, you think the caregiver has the same the same interest in delivering care to the patient if he knows that if the patient not there to pay it, a third party is going to deliver the check. You see, the health care system is built into the profit motive. I guess that's Ayn Rand again, isn't it? Because Ayn Rand talked about, in one of her best books, I think, and she wrote, I don't know of a bad book that she wrote, but in her book called The Art of Selfishness, the question is, when the care is being delivered, okay, you are the patient, and someone is delivering the health care service. Okay, are the interests of the two the same? I mean, is the caregiver, is he being cured? No, he's being paid, and the payer is important. I know you haven't heard this before. I'm telling you how this works, how this selfishness works. I mean, let me say it a different way. In terms of the politicians, I know you think politicians are going to solve your problems, and they are going to deliver all these wonderful things because these are some good folks. They didn't have a mother and father like you had. These are people who were born of gods, right? And they just are so concerned about the American people. And they want the best health care for the people. They want power. They want health care. Okay. So in delivering the health care to you, what do they get out of it? I mean, you feeling better? Okay, fine. The doctor, okay, he's over there, and you go there, and the person's taking care of the medical issue. So you're feeling better. How does that interpose itself in the political arena? Are they feeling better because you're feeling better? They have their interests, right? And you have your interest. You want to get well. Your getting well does not affect their well-being. If they get sick, they want to get well. So what is in the interest of the politician? That's what I'm asking. For you to get well, what do they get out of the deal? You see, everybody has always, you have to always ask yourself a question that goes back to the issue of selfishness. Because selfishness is a virtue. If you don't look out for your own self-interest, who's going to look out for it? The virtue, this is what Ayn Rand wrote, the virtue of selfishness. Anyone that says, if anybody tells me that somebody's doing something in Washington out of the goodness of their heart, I don't believe that. Out of the goodness of your heart, what, did you have a mother and father like I did? Or were you born of the gods? You don't do it. They're not doing things out of the goodness of their heart. Their interest as politicians is power. And to take over the healthcare system, you don't get, they don't feel good about themselves and feel healthier because they're delivering health care. What they get out of the deal is that they are engorging themselves on more and more power. That's what F.A. Hyatt is talking about, the road to serfdom.
They have no idea of what they're doing. They passed this health care bill that we now have, known as the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. But it doesn't address the key issue that you're talking about, the health, the cost of it. But everybody's applauding it. But it caused failures all across the country, and it has to be changed because otherwise, at the rate it's going, the health care is not going to be non-existent to help anybody. So I mean, they keep on saying it's being propped up just by the press. I mean, it really is, or not. The press not covering it.
John, you're making a great point here. The healthcare system wasn't broken in the first place. They had socialized medicine in Canada. You know where Canada was going to get the healthcare? Because when you have socialized medicine, where you are robbing Peter and putting Peter's money over here to pay for services that Paul is getting, Paul wants those services because those services don't cost him anything, because Peter's paying for it. So what happens in the socialized medicine is that you got these long lines here, and people feel a tingle in their toe. They got to go to the doctor and get surgery for that. The cough, they can't take care of that by themselves. Government, it's on government's dime. And so because of the backlog, and you're on a list, some of those lists, if you have a heart condition, by the time you get to the doctor, you've already died in many cases. That's how you're on a list. You don't get the service at the time that you need it. So what they were doing in socialized medicine in Canada is going basically two places in America. Detroit was one, and also Cleveland. The clinic in Cleveland. And they had what they call, they talk about affordable care. What you want is, and that's another thing that needs to be talked about as well. People talk about affordable care. What you want is accessible care. If affordable is an issue, only if you have people able to breathe. Let me ask you if you're not able to get, let's say you're having a heart attack, and you have to get medical treatment. Do you care what the cost is at that point? If that doctor comes in that room right there while you gasping for air, if he tells you $1 million is going to be the cost, you don't care about that. You're trying to you're having a heart attack, and you're trying to survive that crisis. And the cost is secondary. I'm not saying it's going to be $1 million. I'm saying that is not, you see, accessible care. Nobody talks about, okay, we got affordable care. Okay, fine. Okay, good. Is the care accessible? And under the socialized medicine, it's not accessible because you have this backload. You call your doctor sometime and see when they can see you. You call us up an appointment. You see if that appointment can take place the next day. They set your appointment up 6 months ahead of time. When you go to your doctor, they tell you they give you a 6 month from that appointment. They'll ask you, can you come on this day? But it's not like tomorrow or a week from there. It's a lot of time between this visit and the next visit. And I'm not saying you'll need the care in the immediate time period. I'm saying it's not available. So they talk about affordable care. Okay, fine. Is the care accessible? And in socialized medicine, the answer is no. And that's why Canada, until we broke our system here and took on the broken system, the socialized system, they were coming here for the care. But you think they're coming down here now? You got the same problem here that they have in Canada. You just come from across the pond to come here for health care. They're not doing that anymore. Because we didn't look over there to see how their system was broken, and over here we broke it over here. And they can't believe that when we had a model of the brokenness over there and north of us, and we act like we couldn't see up above and couldn't see over across the pond what had happened there, and we're down the same road. And they can't believe us. They can't believe, these are their words, they can't believe that we'd be that stupid. And they're raising the same question about this immigration. We see it in Europe, and they can't believe that you saw it in Europe, and they still are going down that path. But why would they do that? They're doing it because it engorges the power of the federal government, and it's not about anything about care. It's not even anything about the nation being cared for. Their decision making is not to bring about a greater quality of life. If they were doing that, they would not be fighting a man who said he wanted to make America great again. And they're fighting this man every step of the way. And part of the reason they're fighting him is because he said that. Making America great again means to make America small again. To make government small again is what I meant to say.
Yeah, and they act like they're so pleased with America. Okay, on one hand they're saying, "Oh, what?" I'll roll their eyes and say, "No, he's saying make America great again." What does that mean? Oh, it means all white. It's a racist statement.
Wow.
No, that's fake. But then they're the ones that rail all the time about how much we need to improve. So these guys are nut jobs.
They're nut jobs.
On one hand they're saying we're totally terrible. We got to look at Europe. Look at Europe. Look at Europe. Look Europe. And then we're saying when somebody said, "Let's make America great again." They're not even saying, well, what he's saying about that. They're just saying that phrase, and they automatically say, that's a racist comment. Did you remember? You remember that?
Yeah, sure, John.
And it's absurd. It's just nuts.
Yeah, that they are nuts. And that's another whole discussion there. This is insanity that we're looking at. You don't need to. You got enough stuff that's broken that you have to fix. You don't need to break it in. You don't have to break that which is fixed and then break that and fix that because it's too much. See, this is like the Keynesian idea. John Maynard Keynes' idea was that you can create wealth by employing people after breaking stuff that's fixed, and then employing people to fix the stuff that you broke. And that's one way of increasing, wealth. And I don't know where that idea came from that Keynes came up with, but that's not how you grow wealth. To grow wealth is to fix, do things that, you fix stuff, and after you fix that, you fix something else. Or you invent something else that is another technology that's not in place, and then that creates another expansion of the economy. In other words, you just continue to develop. You develop your way into prosperity. You don't break stuff into prosperity. And this idea that the people in this country are going to have government fix it, that's another tremendous problem, paradigmatic problem. The government doesn't fix anything. The government comes in and uses force, and force is a monetary issue. Because wherever force is applied, liberty therefore is absent from the force because of the force. And wherever there's an absence of liberty, there's also an absence of productivity. Ask Venezuela for that, as an example of that. The latest example of it. And I was listening on the way to the studio about this guy Mandura down there, Nicolas Mandura. This pipsqueak is asking them to go to the ballot box and vote more power to the government. Give me a break. Government power makes liberty disappear. See, there's a person on my Facebook wall that was arguing this point that I wrote a post, and the post was on, can we get to the point of doing that which will put us in a better position to survive, and that is to get rid of the two parties that is the biggest challenge to the country surviving, and that's the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Those are two, you might as well call them the Taliban. And so one person put on my wall, socialism, something about socialism. And I was raising the question, where has that worked anywhere? And he writes back, it was, of course, two excuses they make. Outside interference, it would have worked perfectly if there had not been people on the outside, sabotaging it because they don't want to have that. Can you imagine that discussion? Government doesn't want to have more power. Socialism is government power.
Well, people don't understand. Socialism is not meant to be a stagnant, permanent state. It's supposed to be a transitory. If you look at the Marxian viewpoint of it, it's supposed to be a transitory state to communism, and then after communism, you have a wither away to the state, which means you have the strong, very brutal bit that's needed. They always justify it, and then it'll gradually wither it away but it never happens. That point never happens.
Have they seen these statistics about how many people they talk about how many people have been killed because of religious wars? They put that out there, right? And they'll say how many have been killed by this. They'll name something else that is extraneous, that doesn't have a name on it. You know, like you say, religion. Okay, well, who's the person, right? What group? And so they name these things. Look, more people have been killed in the history of the world by their politicians. In America is no different. We're still trying to catch up. I hope we never catch up, but we're still trying to catch up in terms of the number of people that died on the battlefield for the number of persons that died on the battlefields in this country between 1861 and 1865. And it wasn't until recently that we exceeded those numbers of deaths on the battlefield. And I'm talking about World War I and World War II. All Vietnam, up until the time of the Vietnam War and before that the Korean War, we had not exceeded the numbers. There were 620,000 Americans killed in the so-called Civil War in this country. Government, go look in the numbers. Go look at the numbers that in these other countries, in these socialist countries in particular. 30 and 40 and 50 million in these totalitarian governments. Because if there's no restraint upon power, then power turns on its own citizens. You don't think the framers understood that? If they didn't understand that, how do you explain the Second Amendment? How do you explain that? Where they made the provision absolute. You can't put any restraints upon ownership of guns in this country. On the ownership, you can certainly put rules into place about people using guns to do what they're doing in Chicago. There's no license for that. And that needs to be dealt with, and would be dealt with if you didn't have these politicians in here being light on crime. You have to clamp down on that stuff, and you can't be putting them in this revolving door. Those kinds of acts need to be punished by those that are involved in the acts. You don't take the guns away. You punish the criminal behavior in the use of the guns. And if I have a hammer, you know, a song, and you use a hammer in that, you don't take the hammer away. You punish a person wielding the hammer, and make it clear that that is going to happen, and it's going to happen resolutely and absolutely, without any doubt. Government will in fact do its job. And its job is to protect the citizens. And we had 100 people over there that died. Not 100 died. 100 were shot. 15 died. And that's just one weekend. And did you see dead fish? Over there, I'm just using that name that's been used by Sean Hannity. You see him over there calling for more. See, if he tells me that he cannot stop the shooting, you bring in more force. If I had 100 persons shot in one weekend, that next weekend I got the National Guard on the streets. Because I want to show the criminals that you're not in charge of the streets. And if that doesn't work, I'll do what they did down there, since you get ready to show this movie on Detroit. And Detroit, by the way, was caused by the riot. They're going to talk about, this is the 5th anniversary, right, of the Detroit. They're going to talk about the Detroit riot was rebellion. A rebellion at my foot. Rome was burning. And what was Nero doing? Playing the fiddle. You ought to go behind the scenes and see what was going on. There was no rebellion. Somebody threw a bottle and nothing happened. Some other folks watching it They throw a bottle and nothing happens. Somebody break a window out, they don't stop it. And before you know it, the word gets out, hey, free stuff. And then when the rebellion gets out of control, quote unquote, the rebellion gets out of control. When people start rioting because they find out what the government would not do its job, that's what that was about in Detroit in '67. Then, because the politicians are to blame for it, they want to talk about this was urban rebellion. This was the government failing to do its due diligence in terms of keeping people safe. And dead fish over there in Chicago, did you see them panicking over that? No, not at all. And we're on the road to serfdom. Government's getting more and more power and really getting out. When people get out of control, government has a more prescient excuse to assume more control because people are not being protected. But they're not being protected because the government is not doing its job.
Yeah, this is what's going on with George Moss, and this is All Points TV. You're listening to this also on WFOV 92.1, the People's Voice. Anyway, we're going to go a little bit longer but I just want to get that in before we lose those people from WFOV. And thank you for joining us. And this is All Points TV. The show is called What's Going On.
Okay, and with that being said, we want to wrap it up here. We want you to watch this healthcare issue because this is not about healthcare. That's why you had those 3 Republicans last week who have been putting repeal and replace legislation on Obama's desk, knowing he's going to veto it. And then last week, when it was time for them to step up to the plate, Collins in Maine, Murkowski in Alaska, and John McCain, right, in Arizona, they came out to kill the health care because it's all a scam. It's all about power, and they've taken the power from the people in terms of the health care, which is 1/6 of the economy, 16%, 1/8 of the economy, and they're not going to hand that back to you. That's what this is about. This is all about power and the road to serfdom. Okay, want to have you stay tuned to all the programs here at allpointtv.com and also our partners at FOB Radio 92.1. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.